It started with a marriage neither of them expected. But what happened that night changed everything. Jamie and Claire's wedding was not born out of love, but out of necessity. Claire, a woman out of her own time, was forced to marry Jamie to protect herself from capture and suspicion. On the surface, it was a quick decision, but underneath, it was the beginning of one of television's most powerful love stories. Claire Randall was not a typical bride. Just days before, she had been trying to find her way back to her own husband, Frank, back in the 1940s. She had fallen through time, pulled into the 18th century, through the mysterious standing stones at Cray na Dun. Everything around her was unfamiliar. The people, the language, the dangers, and yet, in the middle of this strange new world, she met Jamie Fraser. Jamie was everything Claire wasn't expecting. A Highland warrior, strong, loyal, but surprisingly gentle. From the moment they met, there was an undeniable connection between them. But still, the idea of marrying him felt impossible. She didn't belong in his time. She was already married, and Jamie, though kind, was still a stranger. But the political threat was real. If Claire didn't marry a Scotsman, the English could legally take her as a prisoner. Or worse, accuse her of being a spy. The only way to protect her was for her to become the wife of a Highlander. And Jamie, with no hesitation, agreed. For Jamie, it wasn't a duty, it was honor. He said he would rather be married to a woman he respected, even if they were strangers, than to watch her be taken or harmed. There was something pure about Jamie's offer. He wanted to protect Claire, not possess her. So, in a quiet chapel lit by candlelight, surrounded by people they barely knew, Jamie and Claire said their vows. It was a moment of sacrifice and survival, but something unexpected began to happen. Even before the night began, the way Jamie looked at Claire was different. It wasn't just kindness, it was curiosity, admiration, and something deeper. Something that neither of them could fully name yet. Claire, despite everything, began to feel the pull. Jamie's presence was calming. He listened to her, trusted her, and treated her like an equal. There were no games, no expectations, only a quiet, respectful bond forming between them. As the sun set on their wedding day, Claire wasn't thinking about politics or survival anymore. She was thinking about Jamie. She was still confused, still torn between two worlds, but her heart had started to drift. And in Jamie's eyes, she saw not just a protector, but someone who could truly see her. The stage was set for a night that would begin as strangers and end as something more. The wedding was over. The vows were spoken. The rings exchanged. But for Jamie and Claire, the real test of their new relationship was only beginning. As they stepped out of the chapel, hand in hand, the weight of what had just happened started to settle between them. They were husband and wife in name, but still almost strangers in heart. The Scottish tradition was clear. The wedding night must be consummated. The marriage wouldn't be considered official otherwise. Their companions, mostly Highland men, made jokes and offered whiskey, filling the air with laughter and teasing. But beneath all of it, there was tension. Everyone expected something to happen. Everyone was watching. Jamie and Claire were led to a private room above the inn, a modest chamber, dimly lit by a fire, with a simple bed in the corner. As the door closed behind them, the noise of the wedding faded into silence. For the first time that day, they were alone. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was thick with nervous energy. Jamie stood still, not moving too fast, giving Claire space. His face showed no pressure, no rush. He was patient. Claire, on the other hand, felt her heart pounding. She had been through so much in such a short time, and now she stood before a man who was technically her husband, but emotionally still unknown. She poured them both a drink. The whiskey warmed her throat and steadied her hands. Jamie took his too, then gently asked her if she would like to talk first. And so they did. They sat, facing each other, with nothing but firelight between them, and slowly they began to ask questions, simple ones, small ones. Jamie asked about her past, what she liked, where she had lived. Claire, careful with her words, asked about his childhood, his family, and his dreams. Bit by bit, the walls between them began to fall. Jamie admitted something that caught Claire off guard. He had never been with a woman before, not out of lack of opportunity, but by choice. He had promised himself that the first time would be with his wife. Claire was moved, even surprised. In a world where men often bragged about their conquests, Jamie's honesty felt rare and real. It was a sign of who he was. Deeply respectful and incredibly sincere. Claire, in contrast, carried the memory of another life, another marriage. Her heart still held the image of Frank, the man she had loved and been separated from by time. But sitting here, across from Jamie, she started to feel something shift. Jamie wasn't asking her to forget her past. He wasn't trying to erase Frank. He was simply trying to know her, as she was now. There was a quiet understanding between them, unspoken but strong. They had both been thrown into this marriage unexpectedly, but they had a choice: to keep their distance or to try and build something real. The room was still quiet, but the air had changed. It was warmer now, more open. Claire reached for Jamie's hand, and he didn't flinch. Instead, he laced his fingers with hers, steady and sure. Their eyes met, not with lust, but with a kind of tender recognition. For the first time, they saw not a stranger or a duty, but a possible future. There was no rush, no demand, just a shared decision, slow and careful. They stood together, letting their silence speak for them. In that moment, intimacy began, not with touch, but with trust. The build-up to the wedding night was not about passion alone. It was about permission. It was about safety. It was about two people, bound by circumstance, choosing to let down their defenses. By the time they approached the bed, the tension had softened. They were still nervous, still unsure, but no longer afraid. Whatever was about to happen next, it wouldn't be forced. It would be a beginning. The fire crackled quietly in the background, casting a golden glow across the room. Jamie and Claire stood in the soft light, not rushing, not speaking. The air was thick with vulnerability, but also a growing sense of peace. Something had shifted between them. The fear was still there, but it was no longer in control. Jamie reached out first, not with force, but with a gentle, steady touch. He tucked a loose strand of Claire's hair behind her ear, his fingers brushing her cheek. He looked at her like she was something rare, someone he had waited a long time to meet, and maybe he had. Claire's heart raced, but not out of panic. She was surprised by how safe she felt. Jamie didn't treat her like an object or an obligation. He treated her like a person, with care, with patience, with wonder. She saw no demand in his eyes, only hope. They kissed, not passionately at first, but carefully, like learning each other's language. It was soft, uncertain, but meaningful. Jamie asked her gently, again and again, if she was all right, if she wanted to continue. And each time, Claire gave a silent answer, not just in words, but in how she leaned into him, how she touched him in return. The first time they made love, it was quiet, almost ceremonial. Jamie, inexperienced but deeply attuned to Claire, took his time. Every movement was slow, almost sacred. Claire guided him, and he listened, not just with his body, but with his heart. There was no ego, no rush, just two people, trying to understand each other through closeness. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some movie-style climax, but it was real, and that made it beautiful. Afterward, Jamie looked at Claire with wide, stunned eyes. He whispered something simple, but honest. He told her that he'd never imagined it could feel like that. That being with someone, truly being with them, wasn't just about desire. It was about connection, trust, love, even if they didn't dare say the word out loud yet. And what surprised Claire most was how much she believed him. She had known passion before, back in her own time, with Frank. But this was different. It wasn't just about bodies. It was about presence, about choosing to be fully in a moment without the ghosts of the past or the fears of the future. They didn't stop with just one moment. The night continued, and so did their closeness. In between kisses, they laughed, they talked. Jamie asked her what she liked and listened with an openness that made Claire feel safe enough to answer. She told him about things that had nothing to do with passion, things about herself, her fears, her past. And Jamie, in return, told her about the scars on his body, about the pain he had endured, and the family he had lost. They became something more than newlyweds that night. They became companions, partners, not because they had to, but because they chose to. As the hours passed, their touches grew more confident. The nervousness faded. What began as obligation became affection. What started as protection transformed into a slow-burning intimacy. There was tenderness in every movement, and something new rising quietly between them. Something neither of them dared name yet, but both of them felt, and as they lay together in the quiet aftermath, Jamie looked at Claire and said something that stayed with her forever. He said, "I'm glad it was you." That simple line carried the weight of everything they had just shared. Gratitude, admiration, and yes, love, even if it was still growing. Claire didn't reply right away. She didn't need to. She reached out, ran her fingers across Jamie's chest, and rested her head beside his. In that stillness, she realized something unexpected. Despite all that had happened to her, despite being torn from her own world, she was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to feel something she hadn't allowed herself in days. Belonging. The wedding night wasn't about lust. It was about discovery. It was the moment when Jamie and Claire crossed a line from strangers into something real. And while neither of them could know what their future held, one thing was certain: their journey had truly begun. Jamie and Claire's wedding night was more than just a physical union. It was a powerful turning point for both characters. It marked the moment when their story stopped being about survival and began to be about love. Not a fairy tale love, not instant or perfect, but the kind that grows from trust, respect, and shared vulnerability. For Jamie, this night wasn't just about becoming a husband. It was about becoming a partner. He had grown up in a world where men were expected to be strong and silent. But with Claire, he chose to be gentle and open. He listened to her, honored her boundaries, and gave her space to feel safe. That choice showed the kind of man Jamie was, and the kind of man he would continue to become throughout the series. For Claire, this night was an emotional crossroad. Up until now, her heart had been torn between two times, two men, and two versions of herself. Her love for Frank hadn't disappeared, but something new had begun to grow. She saw Jamie not as a replacement, but as someone who could meet her where she was, with honesty, with care, and with no demand to erase her past. That night symbolized choice. In a world full of uncertainty, they chose each other, not out of pressure, but out of a slow shared realization that they could build something real together. It also symbolized balance. Jamie's tenderness matched Claire's strength. Her knowledge met his loyalty. They were opposites in many ways, but they fit. And that fit would be tested time and time again in the seasons to come. The symbolism of the wedding night also lies in its simplicity. There were no grand gestures, no fireworks, no dramatic music, just quiet conversation, soft laughter, and two people slowly peeling back the layers of who they were. It reminded viewers that true intimacy isn't just about passion. It's about presence, vulnerability, and listening when it matters most. Fans around the world connected deeply with this scene, not just for its romance, but for how authentic it felt. It wasn't polished. It wasn't scripted to perfection. It was human, and that humanity is what made it unforgettable. Outlander fans often call this moment one of the most beautifully written and acted scenes in the entire series. For many, it was the moment they truly fell in love with Jamie and Claire as a couple. Their chemistry was undeniable, but it was the emotional honesty, the quiet strength of their bond, that left the biggest impact. This scene also sparked conversations about healthy intimacy in relationships. Jamie's respect for Claire, his willingness to communicate and learn, stood out as rare for television, especially in a period drama. Claire's ability to set boundaries while still opening her heart gave many viewers a mirror to their own experiences with trust and love. As the series moved forward, Jamie and Claire would face betrayal, war, loss, and separation, but it was this night that built the foundation strong enough to survive all of it. This was the night they stopped being two people thrown together by fate and became something unbreakable. And maybe that's why this scene continues to live in the hearts of fans, because it wasn't just about romance. It was about the beginning of a love story that would defy time itself. So, what did you feel when you watched Jamie and Claire's wedding night for the first time? Was it the tenderness, the vulnerability, the quiet way two souls found safety in each other? Let us know your favorite moment in the comments. And if you're just discovering Outlander or reliving its most unforgettable scenes, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the love stories that stay with us long after the screen fades to black. Because sometimes, the most powerful romances don't begin with fireworks. They begin with a whisper, a promise, and a look that says, "I see you."